All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I want to call to order the City of Santa Barbara Fire and Police Commission special meeting for June 24th, 2021. Carol, can you please do a roll call?
Sure. Chair Stedman?
Here.
Vice Chair Rodriguez?
Here.
Commissioner Allman?
Here.
And Commissioner Travis Teague. We know that she's in attendance, but she is having difficulty with audio, we understand.
Okay, well, hopefully she'll...
We'll mark her present.
Right.
Okay.
Hopefully she'll establish her audio connection. Thank you, Carl. All right, are there any changes to the agenda? Okay. Let's move to item number 4, approval of the meeting minutes of May 27th, 2021. Do we have a motion for approval?
Make a motion to approve.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 John, did you vote? Commissioner
Yes,
Allman?
I did.
Okay. And Carol, is Commissioner Travis?
I'm sorry, yes, she also approved the minutes, I do believe, yes. Through chat. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that motion carries. Let's move on to item number 5, public comment. Do we have any hands raised from the public?
Sorry, let me look. No, we have one attendee and they do not have their hand raised at this time.
Okay. All right, let's move to item number 6, old business, which I see the subnote here is follow up on the addition of fire prevention position and wildland protective plan. Hey, Chief.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Stedman, Commissioners Allman, Rodriguez, and Travis Teague. Good afternoon. I can provide a little update on what's been happening in the last month, but I wanted to give you just a little bit of background if I could, just to bring everyone up to the same page. In our city, we have a special assessment district up in the Riviera area, Eucalyptus Hill, Barker Pass area, that we call the Wildland Fire Suppression Assessment District. In that area, the residents have voted themselves in a supplemental tax, which allows us to focus wildland fire mitigation on that area specifically. It includes one dedicated fire services specialist who handles defensible space inspections, who handles the coordination of chipping, cleaning, clearing, et cetera in that area. And it's highly successful. The problem is that that employee must work 100% of their time in that benefit assessment district. That's great for the residents there, but we saw a need to expand defensible space and some vegetation management into other areas of the community. As you know, we are in the midst of a long-term drought that has stressed our vegetation beyond local recollection. We all have not seen it this dry in many, many years. And looking at fire data, we are likely 2 to 3 months ahead of fuel moistures, et cetera. So, and of course, we saw the Loma fire recently, and it gives an idea of how the vegetation can easily burn. So a few months ago, I put in an amended request as after being asked by council members to increase our sphere of influence in the community with vegetation management. A few months ago also, City Council approved our updated Community Wildfire Protection Plan, which I shared with you. And that really has become a really great blueprint for our community to look at some of our vegetation management units, we call it, some of the areas in our city that are prone to fire. So that Community Wildfire Protection Plan was approved by council. The problem is that it didn't come with funding to mitigate areas that are of high concern. So what we asked for with City Council, and I am pleased to tell you today that it was approved, is we asked for an additional $100,000 for vegetation management. We also asked for an additional defensible space inspector. This will be a non-safety vegetation management, for lack of a better term, consultant that we can use to assist with vegetation management in all of the other areas of the city, not including the suppression assessment district. But most importantly, we received money so that we can begin fuels mitigation. After consulting with our wildland fire specialist, it was determined that the best bang for the buck right now is to concentrate on our community fuels treatment network, which is basically a band above the city that serves as a fuel break. While we've already done some work in there, we have other areas that we need to attend to. So this next year, the $100,000 will be working to improve the community fuels treatment network between Montecito and Mission Canyon. And again, this is designed to create a buffer for any fire coming down the hillside. And anybody that doesn't live in Santa Barbara, the concept of a fire coming down the hillside is kind of foreign. But as you know, we have sundowner winds and fire indeed goes down canyon in our community. So really pleased to tell you that we received the funding from council and we received the defensible space inspector. We did not have receive approval to hire a fire inspector, which would be a safety position. As part of our budget reduction requirements, I submitted a request to not fill that fire inspector position. We had a retirement of our fire marshal and I bumped people up, creating a spot down below. And so we're not filling that position for the next year. However, I'm really happy with the fact that we got a defensible space inspector. And the reason is that right now our regular fire inspectors are doing defensible space inspections. So what's really nice is we'll be able to hire the defensible space inspector and free up our other fire investigators to concentrate on the valuable service they provide. So in a nutshell, I'm very appreciative of City Council. We have some money that we're able to do some high level, high hazard mitigation. And we have an employee that will be able to work all over the city consulting with homeowners on their defensible space. So overall, I think that we've done really well. We'll be doing really well for the community this next year. End of report, unless you have any questions.
So, Chief, did you say the fire marshal retired?
Yes. Yes, Joe Poirier retired in the beginning of June. After 38 years of service with us, he decided to retire. And with that retirement, we bumped up one of our fire inspectors to fire marshal. So everybody kind of bumps up a spot. And so the salary savings is being realized at the bottom. And so when we get that position back next year, which I'm forecasting, then we will be able to appoint a permanent fire marshal. But for now, over the next year, we'll be using 2 acting fire marshals in that position, which is invaluable experience for them. They get to work as a fire marshal, gain some on-the-job training. And again, I'd be really concerned if we hadn't got that defensible space inspector, but I think that's really gonna, in the next few months, take a lot of load off the initial, or the fire inspectors.
And so this defensible space inspector is not limited to that particular region that you described. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes. With the WFSAD, we call it, another acronym, WFSAD, Wildland Fire Suppression Assessment District. That employee physically must work within that postage stamp. That's where the assessment district is. That person has to give 100% dedication to that area. This inspector will be able to work in the remainder of the entire city. Not only will they be able to do defensible space, but they will be able to help coordinate the wildland fuels mitigation. We use a combination of CAL FIRE crews, we use contractors, and we bring, we don't have the personnel to do the fuels mitigation ourselves, so we contract it out. And so that's where some of the cost is. So yeah, we'll be able to open up that employee for inspections all over the city.
Sounds like a great update.
Chief, a question, would that essentially be a civilian then, that position, or?
Chair Stedman, Commissioner Allman, yes, that is correct. This is a civilian position. It will be a non-safety position and someone dedicated just what I would call single role of just doing wildland mitigation and defensible space. And but here's what's important is this is a great stepping stone into our department. This person after, hypothetically, this person after gaining, experience as a defensible space inspector could apply and become an actual fire inspector for us. So what's really nice is it opens up the position for a great learning curve in vegetation management, which is all important. And then they would be able to move through the organization as they desire.
Thanks.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Are there any more questions for the chief?
Just want to say congratulations. That's quite a budget boost and a much needed position. And yeah, good job.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a team effort, as always. As always, I'm just the delivery person, but we have a really dedicated staff, especially our fire prevention division and the wildlands fire specialists do a great job for the city. So they really packaged up the proposal and helped a lot getting it forward. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Chief Mills. All righty. So we're moving briskly through our agenda. We're already on item number 7. The police and fire liaison reports. Commissioner Allman, did you want to say anything from the fire side?
Actually, I am.
Fire department side, I should say.
Yeah, sure. I don't have anything really to share except that I'm very happy to hear about the money the city has allotted to the fire department. That's a big step, and I'm kind of surprised and happy that it happened. It's a really good move, really great. But I don't have anything else as a report.
Got it. Yeah, I love hearing that kind of incremental advancement news, I guess, within both departments. That's fantastic. On the police liaison side, let me see, I see Commissioner Travis Teague. Commissioner, do you have audio?
I believe that I do now. Are you able to hear me?
We are able to hear your voice.
Thank you.
On the liaison side, I have Commissioner Travis Teague shadowing me her term. We did meet with Chief Malekian. So Travis Teague, do you want to take an opportunity to maybe summarize your experience or some of the information that you learned I'm giving you the floor right now to talk a little bit about your interaction with Chief Malekian.
Thank you, Chairman Stedman. It was an insightful meeting. As you mentioned, I am shadowing you in a training mode. The three of us discussed the past relationships with the chief, and he was kind and generous in sharing his availability to the community and to the commission. We talked about other reports that have been given in the past, data statistics, reports from different departments of the police, and how going forward this probably would be helpful for our commission. I felt that it was a good learning experience. I was very appreciative of the opportunity and the courtesies extended to me by the chief and by you as well, Chairman Stedman.
Yeah, absolutely. It was good having you there. And I don't want to take away any of Chief Malekian's substance for his report, but he did talk a little bit about problem-oriented policing. That might be a line of inquiry you can pursue, Vice Chair Rodriguez, problem-oriented policing. And then a little bit about some of the efforts concerning the mitigation of homeless encampments and parks. And I did notice an article, I think in today's Ed Hat maybe, or Independent, or no, it was actually on Instagram, where the police department was participating with some of the other enforcement agencies in the county to clear out encampments and clean them up. The chief did mention some neighborhood traffic issues, and also that Laura Dane's last day with the city is June 30th. So I don't know if Laura's on the line or not, but if you are, Laura, I want to extend from myself and on behalf of the commission, a big thank you for your service and support while you were in this role for us. And good luck in Texas or wherever you're going, Laura. Where are you going?
I am here. Thank you very much. It was a privilege working with all of you.
Excellent. Well, safe travels. And think of how cool it's going to be in Santa Barbara when you're in Texas.
Absolutely. I will be coming back too.
All right. Great. Thank you, Laura. Thank you very much for your service. I guess the chief mentioned that Nicole Casper will be taking over for Laura. Nicole Casper. So that's really the update from both the liaison positions. I guess we could move on to the chief himself, Chief Malekian, unless there are any questions from any of my fellow commissioners. We'll move right on to item number 8, which is the police department report.
Chair Stedman and commissioners, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for acknowledging Laura and her departure. I have no doubt that her life adventures moving on in this next chapter are going to be great, but she'll be sorely missed. And as you mentioned, I have selected or asked Nicole Casper to, after an interview process with a number of highly qualified candidates, to take over from Laura, and I'm very excited that she's going to be on board. I think she's going to be a great addition, and I think the level of service that you've seen from this office will continue without a hitch. Going forward, in terms of a report for the month, there's a couple areas I would like to talk about. One is some changes that we are in the process of making in the department to deal with the 24% functional vacancy rate that I mentioned both at the last meeting and during the city's budget process. As you mentioned, Chair Stedman, in our conversation with yourself and Commissioner Travis Teague, I did talk about really the two of the most significant ways that police patrol services can be delivered. And one is in simply response to calls for service, which covers a whole spectrum from life-threatening emergencies to very routine administrative type reports. Those are broken up into priorities, and you respond to them in the order that they're received based on priority. The problem with that, particularly if you are short-staffed, it does not allow you the luxury of really concentrating in an appropriate way on significant problems that the community may be facing. And I identified, since the time I've been here, with the help of the commission and the public and the officers who work here and everyone else, really 4 main areas that I think are our most immediate concern. One is State Street, and particularly the nightlife and the return, particularly as the COVID restrictions lift. I've talked about this publicly as well, and I think I mentioned it briefly in the commission last week. We're concerned because as you know, State Street is going to remain closed. The parklets are going to remain in place, and people who have been bottled up for 15, 16 months are really looking for a way to get out. And so I think increasing our presence in that downtown corridor is going to be critical to maintaining a balanced quality of life. Secondly is the issue of the homeless encampments and the need to support the city's work. And you may have seen some publicity over the last few days about the cleanup in the parks over the weekend along the Amtrak rail corridor yesterday. And this work, actually the homeless encampment movement around from the high fire areas hasn't officially started yet. But it's already underway in terms of contacting people, trying to introduce them to services and alternatives, and explaining to them that the alternatives that actually exist now in terms of other places that they can go. One of the things I feel very strongly about, and this seems to resonate with the city, is that really this issue is not a law enforcement solution. This is not a problem that the police are going to solve. I think our 2 biggest contributions are, one, to ensure that the people from environmental services and from county behavioral wellness and other places have an appropriate sense of security and safety as they go about their work. And secondly is to take advantage of the fact that we do have a team, a sergeant and 4 officers that have been pretty much continual contact with homeless residents in the encampments really during the entire duration of COVID and probably before. And so they have a lot of knowledge about specific individuals and what their concerns are. And I think there's a good synergy with the folks that are trying to help with that. But I think moving these homeless encampments out of the high fire areas is probably going to consume a lot of time for the rest of the summer. And we'll be deeply involved in that. Third is the area of the waterfront hotels and the concerns that those hotels have, particularly with regards to bike thefts and break-ins to cars from their customers. As you know, that band of hotels adjacent to the waterfront are really critical to the economic engine of Santa Barbara. And I think we want to be of assistance in terms of providing what I've come to refer to as a felt presence in terms of how we deliver that. And then lastly is neighborhood traffic issues, which is a continual ongoing. There are complaints from residents and businesses all over the city about the need for more traffic. So to that end, I have moved some personnel around. That process began this week. It will probably continue through the middle to the end of July as we comply with some of the agreed upon selection procedures and moving people around. But in the short version, the abbreviated version is that the traffic enforcement unit, the motorcycle unit will get 2 additional officers. And the neighborhood policing unit, which is a combination of what was referred to as the street crimes unit, but is actually the homeless outreach team, and the special enforcement team, who essentially concentrates on nightlife enforcement as well as youth violence reduction. That unit will get 2 new positions as well. And when I say new positions, those positions are being transferred from patrol to those units. We did not get any new positions in the budget. We're also working on the creation of a civilian police service technician position. The position actually exists, but we're going to expand the role significantly of what they do and move them into 3 distinct areas. One is a call taker position in dispatch to allow, and I may have forgotten to mention that one of the biggest burdens that we have in the patrol force is that we have 7 full-time officers assigned to dispatch because of the shortage of dispatchers. I'm going to move 3 of those officers back to field operations. That's part of the way we're getting the positions in motors and in the neighborhood policing unit. So that process is underway, but the new civilian positions, one will be call takers and dispatch. Second area will be assigned to patrol forces to take routine reports that don't have any suspect information or don't require any follow-up. Things like found property or, like I said, minor crimes with no real descriptive information. And then thirdly is a concept that was actually recommended by the RAND Corporation probably 20 years ago, which was the use of investigative aids. And this is done in other departments in Ventura County, for example. Both the police and sheriff's department do this. But essentially, each group of detectives, a great deal of a detective's work is administrative in nature. A lot of their time that really should be spent analyzing evidence and looking for suspects, they end up doing things like making sure that the DA gets the required discovery or the subpoena list get prepared, and other sort of administrative tasks like that. And so we're going to try to move a couple of investigative aids into the Detective Bureau to help lighten that burden. We think that'll be very helpful. And if this works out, and I think it'll really be, I think we're really optimistic that we can bring this civilianization program online by the end of the summer in some fashion. And certainly by next year's budget season, we will have hopefully have some significant data points to justify asking for some additional positions. And this really is a force multiplier for the police. It is not a loss of police personnel, but it is a force multiplier that I think has the potential to make a huge difference. So in a very short way, I want to stop. I have 2 other areas to talk about very briefly. But obviously, I covered a lot of ground here about our response to staffing, the configuration of patrol, and what I see as the main problem areas, law enforcement problem areas facing the city. And I want to stop and see if any of the commissioners have any questions about that.
Chief, I have one quick question. I know going back to dispatch, you've taken some officers out of dispatch to put back on patrol or the street, and you brought a call taker in. That's a net loss of what? I mean, I don't know if we have something big go down. Is there enough folks in there to handle?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Allman. And I should have mentioned what our response to that is. The call taker position isn't filled yet. So you're absolutely correct that those 3 positions that are taken out of there, we estimate that we have about 18 people in the department that are qualified to work in dispatch. Most of them are sworn personnel. I'm not talking about the people who are in dispatch now, but people who have the certifications. And so we're going to create an overtime sign-up list. And so people will go into dispatch. Dispatch will be staffed. It's not a loss of operational staffing. It's just a question of how those positions will be filled.
Thank you. They do a terrific job. I have to listen to them. So
I've said any place that will listen that I think that dispatch is the most underappreciated and possibly the most important cog in the whole criminal justice wheel. And I could spend a whole session just talking about the role that they play, they both do play and could play in the future.
Thank you so much.
Chief, I had a question about the 24% vacancy rate that you have now. I remember hearing Chief Luno talk about, I think they were like averaging around 20% staff shortage. Is this typical of the industry? Is Santa Barbara in particular difficult to recruit for? Can you talk about that? I remember it just seemed like she would take 2 steps forward and 1 step back when it came to staffing.
That's Commissioner Rodriguez, that's a very good question. And I want to emphasize one thing. The 24% is actually what's called a functional vacancy rate. So we're authorized 142 positions. We technically have 124 personnel. However, then when you start subtracting out people who are injured on duty, the 7 officers who are on dispatch, the 3 people who are in the academy, the person who's with the training officer, that's how you get that functional vacancy rate down to 108. It is unfortunately right now typical of the industry. And interestingly, the problem, the challenge, at least on the national stage, is not so much recruitment, although that is a problem. I mean, the pool of people who are showing up to apply for jobs has definitely gotten smaller, but that's actually been going on for a decade or more. Where we're losing people, where the industry is losing people, not so much Santa Barbara right now, but where the industry is losing people, is people who are retiring as soon as they're eligible to do so. And in some cases, and we've had a couple this month, people who have chosen to leave for family or other considerations, and they haven't even hit retirement eligibility yet. So it remains a challenge. I did also forget to mention that this week, with the approval of the city administration, I authorized a recruiting bonus for anybody who brings either a police officer or a dispatcher into the police department. It's a $3,000 bonus, and it's $1,500 the day the person is hired. And this goes to the person who brought them into the organization, not the person who's hired. $1,500 to the day they actually start, they get hired, and an additional $1,500 the day they successfully complete their probationary period. So I'm hoping that serves as a bit of an incentive. But it remains a problem, and we're looking at a number of ways to really try to boost up recruitment, again, both of police officers and dispatchers. We have critical shortages in both.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, I think that was a great line of inquiry, Vice Chair. Chief, on the same point, since you're quoting a percentage of 24%, what's the goal in terms of, reducing that percentage, let's say by the end of the year?
I think whether it's not, I haven't put a timeline on it, but I would certainly say that it's very normal to function around a 10 to 12% vacancy rate at any given time. Although interestingly, I saw some data that said that in 2016 and 2017, the department was fully staffed. Which was interesting because most departments never get to a place where they're 100% staffed. The continual flow of retirements and on-duty injuries and other things, generally you have trouble with the hiring queue keeping up with that. But if we could get down to 10%, 12%, I'd be very happy with that. And that would really require us bringing on realistically, another 12 to 15 people.
Wow. Well, I appreciate learning about all the strategic moves that you're making within the department, especially beefing up the detective squad. That seems like that's one of the more critical workflows in terms of, like you mentioned, analyzing evidence and moving cases along and getting out the information that the DA needs, et cetera. So I appreciate your management and experience on that problem.
Thank you. I don't know if there's any more questions on this. I'll talk briefly about crime and COVID, and then interestingly, last month saw a significant drop in both property crime and violent crime. Although the year to date remains high. But for example, violent crime, while it's up 7% for the year compared to 5 months, this data is through May, so the first 5 months of the year. It's up 7% for the year, but the May data was down 12% from the same month in 2020. And property crime is up 17% for the year, but down 17% for the month. And I don't have a specific reason for that, other than it'll be interesting to see over the next month or two if this is a function of of the lifting of COVID restrictions, which I think is very possible, because it is, as you see more people on the presence of people in areas and in neighborhoods and in business areas tend to discourage crime. So we'll see over the next couple of months whether that theory bears itself out. And then lastly, the city issued some guidelines today that I'll share briefly with the commission about COVID, and it brings us into alignment with CDC guidelines. But probably the biggest one, the issue of masks, is police department employees who are fully vaccinated may choose not to wear a mask in the workplace setting. That's effective immediately. And fully vaccinated means that you are 14 days out from either having the second dose of a 2-dose vaccine or 14 days after receiving a single dose of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. If you're not fully vaccinated or you decline to state, then you continue to have to follow the Cal OSHA, previous Cal OSHA protocols, which include things like wearing a mask. You are going to see the public lobby open up a little bit more than it was. It still won't be 5 days a week, but it will be more than it was. And the assumption is that people who enter the lobby without a mask are in effect, there are going to be signs posted to this effect, are self-attesting to the fact that they are vaccinated. We will not be requiring proof of vaccination upon entry into the building. This is, there's a lot of sort of sub-guidelines to this. And there's actually, if you go on the city's website, there's a 19-page explanation of all the detail, which I think is a challenge in itself. But quite frankly, I anticipate that there's going to be probably some more changes over the next week or two. There's a lot of, there's not unanswered questions about the policy, but a lot of unanswered questions about how are things going to be enforced, how are the rules going to be carried out. And so we're still working through that. But the biggest thing is the ability to, we don't have to take temperatures when people come in the building anymore. People who are vaccinated can take their masks off. We can have in-person meetings, those kind of things. So barring an outbreak of COVID, which may require us to go back to some of the earlier restrictions, that's where we stand at the moment. And that concludes my report.
Chief, I have a question for you. During the pandemic or the full shutdown, can you comment a little bit about the amount of reports that were filed online And if that trend is, if you see that trend continuing, what I'm getting at is, less of an impact on our officers actually having to, field those reports or take those reports in the lobby.
Yeah, I was looking for the specific data, but because it was part of my report for the Council for Budget, but over 20,000 or over 20% of our reports were taken online, which is it was several thousand reports, and it'll be. We intend to continue to push that. One of the things as we move to this problem-oriented policing, at least until we can resolve some of the staffing issues, is we are going to have to find alternative ways to deliver certain services. And I think online reporting is going to be a big part of that.
Excellent. Well, that sounds like a very positive trend, I think, for the department and for the community too, to have that option.
Before I started with the department, I actually had occasion to file an online report with the police department on a prowler call, and I was extraordinarily impressed with how easy it was to navigate and how easy it was to fill out the document, and quite honestly, the responsiveness from the police department. I was contacted by a sergeant within a few hours who had read the report. So,
and do you see at any point in the future where there might be like a pilot? I think you mentioned this utility company approach.
Yeah, one of the things I think I talked to you and Commissioner Travis Teague about was, so we look at alternative ways to deliver service. Some reports will still need to be taken in person. And those reports, particularly where there's no active follow-up, which many of them aren't. Somebody comes home and discovers, a theft has occurred, or a bicycle has been taken or something like that. And the way it works right now is you call the police and you report this thing. And depending on how busy we are, we might be there in 15 or 20 minutes, and we might be there in 2 or 3 hours. But one option that some departments have offered up is similar to what the utility companies do, which is to say, if you need non-emergency service, they will offer you blocks of time on specific days that somebody will come out, and you can actually schedule your report. We haven't started that, but it is something that I think is worth looking at.
Excellent. Are there any more points of inquiry or questions from my colleagues?
Sure. Chief Alekian, I'm curious if you heard any updates on changes to the jail policy of holding folks. Anecdotally, it was shared that because folks were being released, they were being booked but not detained. And so we were seeing repeat offenders committing crimes the next day even. So I'm curious if you've heard any changes to the jail policy, and how might that affect our policing?
Two aspects of that question. One is both from my previous life before I came here, and I am aware of that phenomenon, and it is accurate. There is a significant percentage of repeat offenders, but I have not heard yet any information from the sheriff's office about them changing what has come to be known as the zero bail policy. I suspect that there will be some of those, and we will also look to see, do we need to resolve what things are we dealing with that we can resolve in some way other than taking people to jail. I've made that commitment in front of the Board of Supervisors as your police chief, and I'm committed to that. But I do expect the jail policy to change, but I have not heard that it has yet.
Thank you.
Carol, do we have any hands raised for public comment?
No, Chair Stedman.
Okay. All right. If we've exhausted any additional points that the commissioners have to raise, then I want to say thank you very much, Chief. That was a great update. And I appreciate your, being able to answer these questions off the cuff and in a lot of these cases, like naming a percentage, for example, on the vacancy rate.
I will, and I'm going to try next month. I'm actually going to try to do an abbreviated PowerPoint for you. So we'll cross your fingers on that one.
Yay. All right. Perfect. Okay. We are going to move on to agenda item number 9, which is the fire department update from Chief Males.
Good afternoon again, Chair Stedman, Commissioners Allman, Rodriguez, and Travis Teague. Chris Males, your fire chief. I wanted to begin just a quick discussion of what's been going on at the fire department for the last month. We've had some significant issues, and I thought I'd bring you up to speed on that. And then, as is typical, I try to bring us some statistics every month. This will be a very short presentation comparing May 2020 and May 2021 as far as our response times. As I've mentioned before, we use a company called FireStats to pull our statistics together, and our monthly reports look at how quickly our calls are processed, how quickly your fire apparatus get out the door, how quickly we travel, and how quickly we overall get to the scene. So I'll do a little compare and contrast and show you some interesting trends. But first, I just wanted to let you know a few things going on at the fire department. Number one is I've done a small reorganization to our fire department. As you may know, the fire department also houses the Office of Emergency Services, or our OEM manager, Office of Emergency Management Manager, Yolanda McGlinchey. In the past, she has reported to our fire marshal. I've elevated her on the organizational chart so that she reports directly to me. Ms. McGlinchey has a very wide range of responsibilities within the city and is often communicating with city department heads, mostly the police department and police chief. And so I've brought her up higher in the organization chart so that she and I have a direct link together, and she's reporting to me. As a side note, she also has our public outreach coordinator, Liliana Encinas, who reports to her. So Liliana has been elevated with Yoli's elevation. So Liliana now has a closer link to me. As you know, she also has a really wide range of responsibilities and a very high profile within the city of Santa Barbara. So I actually elevated them on the organizational chart, and I think I mentioned their offices used to be over at the fire station. I've moved them over to our administrative office building, also known as our AOB, so that they have a much greater access to me. We've also began instituting a regular public information dissemination program, which you will begin to see. Every Wednesday, there will be a new fire message that comes out. We will be sending out regular public service announcements that are timely with the season, an event, et cetera. For example, we sent out recent information about the 4th of July. So I think that's exciting. It's going to streamline our operations a little bit more in the fire department. So I'm pleased to announce that. Second, I always talk about incidents. We are seeing an increase in incidents in the city. It's more than anecdotal. We are returning to what I would call our pre-COVID days. If you recall in previous presentations, I said that our call volume was markedly diminished or down during COVID. And I believe I told you that, even nationwide, traffic accidents were down 40% at the height of COVID, which is just shocking. We are actually returning to our more pre-COVID numbers, which is really understandable. The public is out, they're out and about doing things, more cars on the road, more bicycles on the road. more people leaving their house, which allows fires to start unattended, that kind of thing. So we're seeing an increase in call volume. And in talking with my medical colleagues, they're starting to see in emergency departments across the US, they're starting to see pre-COVID numbers also. And in fact, seeing very high acuity or very sick people coming into the emergency department that may have neglected their medical care over the last year or so. And correspondingly, we're seeing an increase in medical emergencies also. So this last month, we had a couple of residential structure fires. As you know, I talked with you last month about the Loma fire. So we've had a couple of residential structure fires, and we are already beginning to deploy resources, wildland fire resources around the state. Sent a strike team last weekend to the Crane fire down in the Interstate 5 area. They were only down there for a couple of months and they returned. County fire starting to see some vegetation fires. Very typical in this time of year where we start to see some fires that are easily corralled, lasting just a few hours or maybe a day or two. And as the season progresses, more fires occur. Our resources are more strained throughout the state. Increased fire conditions, we start to see more fires. And so we're planning on having multiple assets out and about at fires this summer. But again, I want to assure the public our first responsibility is always to the city of Santa Barbara. So on a short term where we may deploy a fire apparatus, say in the middle of the night to a fire in Los Angeles County, we immediately are on the phone and recalling personnel to staff that station. So we'll shift resources around within our city, but we do not like to run fire stations dark. So we have a very delicate balance of how many people we send out of town because we really don't want to diminish that station coverage. Next topic for you, the 4th of July. You may have seen some of the proactive messaging going out for the 4th of July. As you know, the city is hosting a fireworks display. Although there's not going to be any food vendors or anything down at the waterfront, we are expecting a large crowd that we typically see. So we'll be having extra fire prevention personnel on duty. And depending on what we're seeing, we may or may not staff additional fire apparatus, but the key is to have fire prevention personnel on duty. Some will be assigned to the actual fireworks show, and some will be assigned to being in the city, just roving around looking for any signs of any issues. Important to note to the public that fireworks are not allowed in the city of Santa Barbara of any kind. They haven't been allowed for many, many years, but it's especially incumbent upon us to be very safe this summer because it's really, really dry out there. So just a reminder to please just go to the professional fireworks shows. Chief Malekian spoke a little bit about COVID. We are indeed in the process of putting out information to our firefighters. The city is doing the same, of greatly changing our COVID protocols, not only for all of our employees in the workplace, but we have the extra issue of fire and police who respond to calls for service. So we're going to be modifying some of our COVID responses. As an example, during COVID, we modified our response procedures to a medical emergency where we would knock on the door and one of our firefighters would go inside and try to bring the patient outside and try to get them out into fresh air. We would not send our 3 firefighters and 2 ambulance personnel all marching into the house. We would ask them to come outside if possible. We're going to return to our normal protocols where we send the whole crew will be going into the house to assess and care for the patient. So, and then we've got some station protocols that will be changing. As Chief Malekian spoke about, those fully vaccinated will no longer have to wear masks unless it's mandated in another way. And what I mean by that is the California Department of Public Health, for example, mandates that in licensed care facilities, we have to wear masks. So our firefighters, regardless of vaccination status, will be wearing masks inside the facilities. But as you know, and as you've seen, the vaccines are extremely efficacious. They're highly successful. They are even highly successful against the emerging Delta variant, which is now about 20% of our COVID cases in the United States. As of a month ago, it was only 4%, and it's gone up to 20%. So we're starting to see that Delta variant that came out of India. Fortunately, the vaccines are a really good match for that. So we're going to be continuing or changing our protocols for our vaccinated personnel. But all that'll come out very, very shortly as the city's rolling out their plan right now. One more focus is on the State Street and State Street Promenade, as Chief Malekian spoke about. Moving officers into that State Street corridor is really important. So I have asked our Fire Prevention Bureau to place an increased emphasis on that area of the city. We've all heard the term roaring 20s, and I'm almost expecting to have a roaring 20s this summer. We expect the bars, nightclubs, restaurants to be packed. And it's the right thing to do. What we're going to do is we're going to send our fire prevention personnel into those restaurants, bars, et cetera, and let everyone know that we're here. We're going to be looking. As a fire chief, I always worry about I worry about any incident. I worry about any fire, but we all, if we read any history books, have seen that, some of the worst fires that have occurred in the United States have been in bars and nightclubs, Coconut Grove, Station Fire. We need to place a big emphasis on our high occupancy locations, and that's going to occur in the State Street area. So on a somewhat regular basis, I'm asking our fire prevention personnel to team up with the police department as they're walking and doing really more safety than anything else. Our fire prevention personnel are not going to be doing law enforcement. That's not the point. They're just going to be tying in and tying in with the police department. What have you seen? Have you seen any overcrowding? That kind of thing. They'll be going in, making sure there's no overcrowding. They want to make sure that exit ways are open and people can egress out of buildings. They're going to be checking exit lights and things like that. So just the point is a more increased presence on State Street. And we'll be doing that on evenings. So that's Friday, Saturday, Sunday evenings will be an increased emphasis on that. And then if it's okay, I'd like to proceed to just a few slides on fire statistics. But before I do, I thought I'd ask if there were any questions up to this point.
Any public comment, Carol?
No, Chair Stedman.
Okay, Carol, I don't have an ability to share my screen, so are you able to do that for me?
Yes, I've got it linked right here, I think. If I can
Okay.
get to the right place.
Great.
You're going to your report, Chief?
Yes,
May
it's just
2020?
correct. It's just a few slides on fire statistics. So just as a reminder, our monthly reports look at response times. Our quarterly reports look at calls for service and the types of calls for service: medicals, fires, vegetation fires, public assist, et cetera. So just a very short report on what we're seeing and a little bit behind why we're seeing all the stats. So next slide, Carol. Or do I have it?
No, it's my technical difficulty.
Okay.
Should be here.
Well, I can talk to you about the next slide you're going to see is what's called call processing time.
There it goes.
There we go. Wonderful. Okay. So looking at May 2020, wow, calls were processed 21% of the time in 60 seconds versus May 2021 that 67% were processed in 60 seconds. Why? Really good explanation for this. Okay. Couple of things. As you know, our dispatchers are emergency medical dispatchers. That means when someone calls 911, they ask a series of questions, including age, chief complaint, status of breathing, status of consciousness. And when they receive a chief complaint, it takes them down an algorithm where they ask a series of questions where they categorize the patient into severity. All patients are categorized into typically about 5 different severity case levels. We have what are called alpha calls. Those are standing for A. Those are the least sick people or least injured people. So it's Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo. So A, B, C, D, E. Your echo responses are your cardiac arrest calls. And so our dispatchers are expertly trained, and I want to echo Chief Malekian's comments. Absolutely, the unsung heroes of the fire service, EMS, law enforcement, are dispatchers. Now, I'm a little biased because I was a dispatcher from 1985 to 1990 back in, yes, we had radios back then. I loved my time as a dispatcher and really, really appreciate the great work that they do. So our dispatchers are emergency medical dispatchers, as I said. They ask a series of questions. What complicated May 2020 was that they had to ask a series of additional questions on COVID. So we made them begin to ask what are called ATD, aerosol transmissible disease questions. If you remember, it went from very early in COVID, have you traveled outside the United States in the last 14 days? And then it became, are you short of breath? Do you have a fever? That kind of thing. So my point is it took more time. So that's why we saw the percentage drop a bit. In response to that, what we did is that we instituted a program or a system with what's called auto launch. And what that means is as soon as Chris Mayles calls 911 and says, I need an ambulance, we launch the fire truck and ambulance, and then we ask all the questions. The point is that, hey, if somebody's calling, they need us, let's get us out the door. So we reinstituted that program of auto launch, which again allows our dispatchers to get the fire apparatus and the ambulance rolling and then to ask the questions. So that's why in May 2021, you see that our call processing time went way down, or you see that almost 67% of the time, we're processing the calls in 60 seconds or less. So we're in a really good, we're moving in a good direction. Now, I will say this, that emergency medical dispatch does categorize patients according to severity. It is a tried and true, verified, worldwide system where it's absolutely remarkable that in a few questions, a dispatcher, actually there's a nexus between the first few questions that the dispatcher asks, and we can actually send that all the way out to hospital outcomes. I know that sounds amazing, but the initial questions that a dispatcher asks, we can literally predict whether the patient's gonna walk out of the hospital or not. And it's a remarkable system. So in the future, we're really gonna have to reinstitute our full emergency medical dispatch interrogation system prior to launching apparatus, because we don't need to send a fire truck and an ambulance, red lights and siren to every call. So we're gonna be very cognizant of that. And as things move forward, we'll be reinstituting our EMD program. Next slide, Carol. Okay, so this is an interesting statistic. I was a little bit surprised by this. In May 2020, you see that we had a turnout time. And again, that's the time from when the bell goes off in the station to the time the wheels are rolling on the fire engine. This is a little bit subjective. To be honest with you, I'm not too concerned about this statistic changing a little bit this month. And it's going to make a lot more sense in the next couple of slides. So initially I may go, boy, our turnout time increased. In other words, it took us more time to get out the door in 2021. A little bit concerning if I didn't have the next two slides. So can you move to the next slide, Carol? Okay, so this is rather interesting. So in May 2020, while our turnout time was lower, you'll see that our travel time was more. So keep in mind that the travel time of 4 minutes, we were at 66% in May 2020, and we're at 74% in May 2021. So there is a little bit of the difference right there. Okay, so perhaps our folks weren't so quick to hit the computer button that they're responding. So that's why our turnout time ticked up a little bit. But then conversely, we were maybe already rolling to the call. So that's why our travel time went down. So not too concerning. This is, if I saw this as a year trend, I might raise an eyebrow, but not over 1 month. It's not concerning. Next slide. And this is the final slide. So this is really interesting. And in May 2020, during the height of COVID, if you recall, I told our firefighters, management told our firefighters, let's not worry about racing to the scene. And the reason why I wanted to make sure in the height of COVID that our firefighters had all of their personal protective equipment on. They arrived on the scene safely. They had good information from dispatch. They knew whether this was a suspect COVID patient. And for lack of a better term, I said, slow your roll a little bit and let's make sure that we're well protected when we arrive on the scene. And keep in mind, we were seeing COVID patients multiple times a day at the height of COVID. So now as we begin to emerge out of COVID, our firefighters are still putting their personal protective equipment on. But you can see that now 63% of the time we're arriving on scene in 6 minutes and 15 seconds. Really from May 2020 to May 2021, we've nearly doubled our compliance with total response time. So are we ever going to get to 100% 6 minutes and 15 seconds? Boy, that would be great. But like Chief Malekian was talking about statistics, I'm not sure if we'll ever be there at 100%. But one of the things that I've asked for and actually was approved in our budget, I mentioned this to you before, was a standards of cover study. And one of the things that a standards of cover study does for our community is it really looks aggregately at our fire responses, where our fire stations are, what our firefighters are responding to. Do we have any holes where we're not getting to calls in a timely manner? It's really going to dissect the fire department response in the entire city of Santa Barbara. So what may be gleaned out of that study is that, hey, we've got a hole over here and perhaps we need to move a fire apparatus, say, to this section of the city. Believe it or not, when you have thousands and thousands of calls in a database, you can predict when and where the next call is going to happen. And I know that sounds absolutely unbelievable, but when you have thousands of calls, you can say likely the next call is going to happen over here. So we'll be looking at this statistic really closely, and with the standards of cover study, I think we'll see some improvement. So that's just a brief overview of our stats for the month, and I'll take any questions.
Hey, Chief, I have a question for you. You mentioned prediction several times, not only today, but previously. And in the civilian world, that's my business, analytics, right? So I'm curious, I mean, usually this is a result of machine learning and the data set getting larger and larger and larger, and the tools getting better and better trained. So is this, what kind of software are you using to get this stuff? Is there like, fire prevention software? I mean, what's it called? What do you use? What's your tool set?
So Chair Stedman, Commissioners Allman, Rodriguez, and Travis Teague, thank you, great question. So this, first of all, there's a number of software analytics that are out there that measure the data metrics for a fire department. Some specialize in certain things like fire dollar loss. Some specialize in response times. This program that you're seeing right now is Fire Stats, and they are all about response times and call types. And they simply look at, so what we do every month is we do what's called a data dump from our CAD, our computer aided dispatch. And the raw data is sent in an Excel spreadsheet with the call type and all the response times. And Fire Stats tears apart that Excel spreadsheet and puts it into this system that is highly accurate, very well done, in my opinion. But there's a ton of different companies out there that do that. Looking at the standards of cover study, that's going to take it to the next level. And what I mean by that is that's going to actually take the city of Santa Barbara on a map, It's going to look at all of our 800 streets and our neighborhoods and everything else, and it's going to establish hot spots, warm spots, cold spots, where we actually know right now where our calls are happening, but we will actually be able to know where they happen, at what time of day, what day of the week, et cetera. Now, anecdotally, I can tell you at this point that we're busier during the day. In fact, our statistics, when you look at our quarterly reports, it's better than anecdotal. You can see that we're very busy in the morning and we're very busy in the afternoon, and our call volume decreases in the middle of the night. You know, we may only have a half a dozen or a dozen calls in the middle of the night, but my response to that is often our calls are more severe in the middle of the night. You know, our structure fires get going before people realize it. There's not as many people driving down the street going, hey, there's smoke coming out the front door of that business. And so we really, you know, our system is set up for the fire problem. That's why we have 8 fire stations in the city of Santa Barbara. It's to respond quickly while that whole bell curve of how fire, you know, gets worse over time. We're really staffed for that reason. But you know, our stations were set up in the long ago. Our stations right now have been set up in the 50s and 60s. You know, we're going to be looking at that. It's the first time with a standards of cover study, we're really going to be able to dig deep with GIS mapping, with data analytics. We're going to be able to dig deep into where our calls are happening. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does. And what it tells me is fighting fire is art and science, because in the last meeting, you mentioned regarding the La Paloma fire. Was that the one by close to City College, or the Paloma fire?
Oh, the Loma fire?
Sorry. Yes.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
And you said you knew that fire was going to charge uphill, correct?
Correct.
Right. So you sent the assets high rather than addressing the initial situation down low. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's that was the strategy that the incident commander employed. It has to do with several things, but I mentioned weather, fuel, and topography. We had what I would call a perfect storm. You know, we had a fire start at the bottom of a very steep hill, thick with vegetation, with a 50-mile-an-hour wind pushing it. The incident commander on that made an excellent strategic decision to go, hey, listen, this fire, no matter what we do, is run into the top of this hill. And what's at the top of this hill? Houses. Those are values at risk. And while brush and private property is a value, I think we can all realize that someone's home at the top of the canyon is a very precious commodity. So you're exactly right. By the end of the night, 11 of the 22 engines that were on scene at the Loma fire were protecting structures in the Miramonte Via del Cielo area. So you're absolutely right. And predictive fire behavior is what we study, you know, day in and day out. And you know, to say that our heads are on a swivel when we're at a wildland fire would be an understatement. You know, we're constantly looking at the weather, constantly looking at the fire. You're really not worried about where the fire is burning. You're worried about where it's going to burn in, you know, 10 minutes, 10 hours, and 10 days. So the strategy that was employed that night was classic, tried and true fire protection.
Well, I think it's important to listen to you walk us through not only the hard numbers and the stats, but also your methodology gained by experience. You know, if I were in the general public listening to this meeting, I would feel much more confident about the money, you know, and our tax dollars that are spent, you know, not only for your leadership, but the entire staffing for 8 stations, including the dispatchers. But thank you very much for elucidating, you know, some of your, it's so insightful to listen to your methodology. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Chief Mills, I have a couple questions. Well, first, a couple comments. It's impressive, and it's wonderful to know that 63% of the calls are being responded to, or a vehicle is arriving within 6 minutes and 15 seconds. That's extraordinary. And I know that when you are calling 911, every minute seems like an eternity. So having that that low time of 16:15 or 6:15 is impressive. So thank you and congratulations on that. Also wanted to make note that the whoever your PIO is, I don't know if it's the city or fire in particular, but I thought they did a wonderful job breaking down how the fire, the house fire, I think it was last week or maybe early this week, was how that was responded to. And it, as a community member who right now, I think we're all nervous about fire, it was really informative. And I think it just reassured the public that we have a very skilled and competent department. So whoever that person is writing that, please extend our gratitude. I do have a question about how the Loma Fire open house went. And then also the last few years, we've dealt with fires, floods, pandemic, and the Loma Fire. So I'm just curious about the well-being of your department.
Commissioner Rodriguez, thank you for that question. Let me go back to the PIO comment first. I wanted to give you a little bit of information about how we disseminate information within our department. I mentioned Liliana Encinas is one of our public information officers, and she is a public outreach coordinator. We typically will be using Liliana to bring about our routine messages. Our messages say for the 4th of July, or a heat wave coming up, or change your clock, change your battery, that kind of thing. What we also have in place is we have a PIO cadre. We have several PIOs. I've actually been PIO trained for a long time, been to many incidents as information officer. We have a number of PIOs that are trained. And when I say trained, that means they attended a class. They're familiar with the city policies on sending out information. And typically I'll say that we often have a public information officer that is on duty at any given time. Because we use the cadre, we can literally look at our duty assignment sheet and go, oh, hey, we've got so-and-so working at this station. Let's get out this message. So that was a great press release. That was done by Kevin Corbett, who's one of our engineers. And Kevin is indeed a public information officer. He's an information officer in the city, and he also goes out on wildland incidents as a public information officer. So we like to get it out quickly, but it's more important that we're accurate rather than quick. So before a press release goes out, it's vetted by someone else. We check it to make sure that it makes sense. And, something as simple as we don't want there to be typos, but we also don't want to rush to get the information out and be wrong. For example, cause and origin of a fire. We may get the press release out, but we may not know the cause and origin right away because that investigation could take days or weeks. So in that situation, it was from what I understand, a fairly straightforward investigation. So the cause and origin went out with the press release, but thank you for that. So what we do, it's kind of two-stage. What we do with an incident is we will often post it to our fire department Facebook and Twitter page first. You'll see something very basic. Information, city fire is responding to a reported, structure fire in the 2000 block of State Street, more information to follow. Then we'll typically update Facebook, and then what we'll do is then we send out the press release. So that one comes a little bit later. The news media outlets will pick up Facebook. They know it's our official distribution source. They'll pick that up. And then we make sure that we send out a really comprehensive press release. And if it makes sense to have a safety message at the end, just to remind people that are reading it that, oftentimes fires are preventable and accidental. So what message can we relate to the public? But thank you for that. Your second point about the community meeting, in my opinion, I think it was very well received. I think Chief Malekian did an excellent job of explaining the difference between alerting the public of those that are in harm's way and messaging the public, which would be to those that are not in harm's way. I stand behind the fact that our alerting of citizens that were in harm's way, we used as you heard me say, the speed that fire went up the hillside, we did not have time to stop and make phone calls and get emergency messaging out. We used the old tried and true, let's get a fire truck up there and start knocking on people's doors. And if you saw the evening city council meeting right after the Loma fire, Chief Malekian showed body cam footage of a police officer at a house actually getting the people out of the house while the firefighters were there. So we did a great job of getting the people that were in harm's way notified very quickly. I think a lot of the concern was the messaging of the public, especially in the Lower West Side. And so my message to the public that day was that we had a really professional fire department that was putting this fire out. And while they had a front row seat and they thought they were their lives were in danger, we knew where this was going. As I said, we knew what was going to happen. It was going to be like a big poof. It was going to go up. And then it was going to die down real quick as soon as it ran out of fuel. So, but it was well attended. I attended along with Chief Malekian. Liliana Encinas provided bilingual translation. We also had Josh Hagmark, who is the acting public works director. And so we all kind of stayed in our lane. I spoke about fire response. Chief Malekian spoke about the law enforcement response. And the public works director talked about what to expect now that the hillside has a burn scar on it, and does it present any significant hazard to the public? And the answer to that is no. This hillside is not capable of a Montecito debris flow. This is a very small burn scar, and we likely have months of preparation before we're going to see any runoff with any water or anything like that. But with that said, they're planning to install K-rail, and they're planning on during big storms to shut off traffic flow in the area. So I think it was very well received. Mayor Murillo and Councilmember Gutierrez were there. I think they seemed pleased with the message we were able to get out to them. And it was also covered with the media outlets, which obviously gets a greater number of people noticing it. So hopefully that answers your question.
Wonderful, thank you. And my last question was just the well-being of your department with all these big emergencies, global pandemic.
Thank you. You know, my concern as the fire chief is always the well-being of the community and making sure we take care of our community. But that linkage is intimately tied to the firefighters, because if the firefighters aren't physically or mentally able to respond to calls, you know, the public can be compromised. I'm pleased to say that I'll back up a little bit. Morale was down during COVID. It's really hard for our firefighters to come to work expecting to go out, meet the public, provide public education, do fire prevention, conduct multi-company drills. We shut that down. We did not do any fire prevention. We had no public education. We did not allow any visitors, including family members, have not been allowed into the station. So it was tough, but we're coming out on the heels of COVID. We're coming out. I'm pleased to say that at least from my perspective and my staff's perspective, I think morale is excellent. I think that the drought and the requirement for our folks to go out of town and to spend days, if not weeks on end, on fires all over the Western U.S. is a bit draining. You know, we all have, most of us have families, and it's tough to miss birthday parties and baseball games and you know, beach days and all that stuff. But we also know when we signed up for a Southern California Fire Department. And California is, you know, highly volatile right now. And so I think our folks are settling into a marathon of, you know, likely increased call volume, but likely fires all over the US. So, but thank you for asking. One of the things we have within our department is a peer support program. And it truly is a peer support program. We have our own firefighters, police officers that are trained in peer support. We have the ADDIES program that was really born in the city and has become a national and international program. And so we have a great program in place where, hey, just one phone call, you know, my firefighter today is having a bad day, and can you reach out and chat with him? We do a great job of taking care of our own, and when we take care of our own, we can do a better job of taking care of the public. So I would say the well-being is we're doing fine. And again, coming out of COVID, you'll start to see our fire apparatus out and about a lot more, and I'm pleased to say that that's a good thing for everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's great to hear.
Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Chief. It's always confidence inspiring to hear your overall take on the view of our fire safety. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from our fellow commissioners?
Yeah, I have some comments if you don't mind. It's Council Member Gutierrez.
Oh, well, you didn't identify yourself. Go ahead.
Sorry. I thought you could see who is on and speaking. I just want to thank the police chief and the fire chief for that town hall that we had on the west side there to address some of the concerns about the Loma fire with the residents. I felt like it was well attended, and Liliana was there giving Spanish translation, which was great. A lot of people, that fire was a wake-up call to a lot of people. So they're all gonna start taking more of a proactive role in preparing for disasters. And in doing the town hall, I actually got a lot of requests from Mesa residents to do one. I spoke to Councilmember Jordan about it, and he told me that he was just redirecting them to the town hall that we had for the west side. But the head of the Omni group on the Mesa, I forget what it stands for, Our Neighborhood Mesa, something or other. Her name is Terry Jory, and she reached out to me and said that she would be willing to host a meeting with her organization and open it to the public, and have the police chief and the fire chief explain their roles in case of an emergency on the Mesa. So that way that those Mesa residents that feel like they need to have a meeting specifically about disaster preparedness could have those concerns met. So I'll keep you all updated about that. Because like I said, I did get a lot of comments from Mesa residents about it. But yeah, other than that, thank you all for doing this.
It's nice to hear your voice, Council Member Gutierrez. Okay, if there are no other contributions or comments about that agenda item, let's move on to new business, item number 10. Are there any contributions from the commission? All right, very well. Let's move on to, did I hear anything? Okay, let's move on to item number 11, staff communications. Vice Chair, did you want to make a contribution?
The Community Formation Commission met, I think it was last week, and the subcommittee or the sub-working groups that were formed the month prior reported back on what they did, the work that they did over the last month. This is still a relatively new group. It's a new committee. So it's just right now a lot of information gathering. I reported last month that they approved to hire a consultant from NACOL, the National Association for Community Oversight in Law Enforcement, and that's really the best that we could get for this type of work. Not much to report. So we're meeting again second week of July.
Excellent. So it sounds like the process is moving along, and it gets more complex every time you report out on it. So
Yeah, I think the July reporting will have some more substantial information to provide.
right. Well, your updates are much appreciated, really. And can you talk a little bit more? I know there was an email sent out about training for us, the commission. What's the plan on that, Vice Chair?
Sure. First, I'd like to invite Commissioner Travis Teague if you wanted to speak on this particular item.
Thank you, Commissioner Rodriguez, Commissioner Stedman, Commissioner Allman. We being Commissioner Rodriguez, Sean Hill, and Graciela Reynoso from Santa Barbara HR met again. And the plan on that training is going forward. We hope to offer a set of dates by the next meeting. And Sean Hill and Chief Malekia will both be involved in that training. And we feel that the program that they are developing will be very beneficial for the council. And it will be informative. I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Rodriguez, that it will be a closed session training for the commission.
Mm-hmm.
And currently, we are looking to do that training by August of this year. Did you have other questions, Commissioner Stedman?
No, I just wondered if we needed to calendar any particular date, I guess, was my question.
We will be asking you to calendar a date, and we have a follow-up meeting coming, I believe this week, if not this week, the first week of July. And then we will be making that request that the August meeting business be minimal so that we have at least an hour for the training.
Got it. Okay, good. Just trying to look ahead a little bit, so I appreciate that context.
Thank you.
You know, I'd like to add that I'm just so impressed with the city, with Ms. Reynoso and Lieutenant Hill and or Sergeant. I always confuse the two, but they are really being extremely thoughtful and just taking a lot of personal responsibility in developing a historically accurate presentation and something that will be meaningful for the folks who are participating in it. So I'm looking forward to learning and growing as an individual and as a commissioner. And I am just proud of our city for having zero resistance to this type of educational opportunity.
I would
Well,
agree with you, Commissioner, and I think that they have gone beyond and above to ensure that the training that they will provide for the commission is valuable, but that it's lasting. And I think in our last conversation, we spoke of the fact that the commission is small now, having lost one member, but that we would do training now and offer it again early next year. And I think that in itself speaks to their commitment to develop sufficient training for the Police and Fire Commission.
well, you know, just like our two chiefs reporting, I appreciate you two reporting on this, and that feedback is so inspiring and heartening to hear. So, you know, because it could be completely different, right? You could be reporting on resistance and, you know, recalcitrance and other, you know, concepts that would impede progress, but that's not what you're saying. So that's awesome. That is really awesome. I appreciate that, commissioners. And we are at 80%. So we are a small commission. The other commission that I serve on is 7. So, you know, we're really tight, but I appreciate, you know, of the 4 commissioners that are here today, all of you have been consistent all year long. I don't think anybody's missed a meeting. So that's fantastic in and of itself.
Commissioner Teague, John, I'm wondering, do you think that'll be a live session or do you think we'll be on Zoom?
We discussed what that would look like, and I think deferred to wait until the city and the county had announced reopening plans. But it very well could be alive, and if not, it will be on Zoom. And I believe that it will be recorded so that we will have it to share and to look back and to revisit some of the details. Am I correct, Commissioner Rodriguez?
I don't think the actual training will be recorded, but the material will be available. And the reason why it won't be recorded is because the city wanted to create an environment where we all felt safe asking questions without worrying how the public might interpret those questions. So it's just truly a space that we can be open, that we can be vulnerable, and learn and really just not have to worry about how others might perceive what we know and what we don't know.
Exactly.
So ideally, yeah, as Commissioner Travis Teague said, ideally we want to meet in person, but this is also, you know, it's clear that this is something that we want to get done for this commission, as well as for the commission that's formed after January.
Well, we're making progress on it, right, John? You guys are tearing it up. Really, you're doing a fantastic job. All pistons are firing from my point of view on this commission. It's more work this year than I've seen in the nearly 4 years that I've served on this commission. The output has been fantastic. So thank you to all of you, every single one of you. Are there any other staff comms? John, anything? All right. I think
I actually have nothing. I have nothing to communicate at this time, no.
Okay, good. No fires to report. That's good. So
No, that was a question, you know, going back just a little bit, that was a question I wanted to ask Chief Malakian too, how his people were holding up. You know, I know they're busy, as are the fire guys. A lot of mental stress going on among those 2 groups. And I don't encounter the police much because I'm not going downtown or anything, but boy, when I see them, I give them great praise. And I know a few officers, most of the ones I work with are now kind of retiring off, but the ones I do know, I'm glad to be around them and work with them. Did you happen to hear that, Chief?
Commissioner Ullman, I did, and thank you. And I will tell you from the perspective of the individual officers, the challenge is not the work. I mean, the work is challenging and it's busy and it's all the things that you say. It's the sense that the public winds are, you know, have shifted, and that maybe their work is not appreciated, or that they're sort of targeted in a way that has never been the case. And I do view, I think I said this to this commission before, one of the reasons that I came back to do this job was because I wanted to help navigate the difficult waters that I think we're in. I think, as I've said this before, we can talk about reimagining criminal justice. We can talk about reforms to police and all that. But there's really 2 conversations. There's a 20,000-foot conversation about policing in America, and there's the 500-foot conversation about policing in Santa Barbara. And I think we need to make that distinction. And I think we also need to make a distinction or an acknowledgement. And I think this commission does. And quite frankly, I think the city does. During the council budget hearings, I think all the elected officials went to a great deal of trouble to acknowledge that whatever the changes are, they're not a reflection on the character or the conduct of the individual men and women that work for the Santa Barbara Police Department. And that's a message that you may get tired of hearing me say, but I will continue to say it. I'm extraordinarily proud to be part of this group.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. Appreciate it. Wow. Wow, that's great. Well, I'll tell you, it feels so good being part of this commission. It's just fantastic. Not only hear the chiefs, but you guys. So much appreciated again. Are there any other staff comms? Are there any public hands raised, Carol?
No, they're not.
Okay, I guess they're all enjoying the good weather, right? So with that said, we can move on to item number 12 if there's a motion.
Commissioner Stedman, this is Assistant City Attorney John Domus. I just want to say it's my chance to also kind of get some revenge quickly. This is Laura Dane's last meeting with us. I just wanted to thank her for all the support she's given me, the commission, the department too, for that. So just wanted to let the commission know that. So.
No, I much appreciated, John. You know, that goes along for you too. Also, what does it say on your hat?
Well, it's a Yankee hat.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I wasn't needed much in this meeting, so I took off the suit and just put on the Yankee hat and t-shirt.
Perfect. Perfect. I love it. I love it. All right.
I just wanted to thank Ms. Danes for all her help. So thank you.
Absolutely.
I'll piggyback on Mr. Doimus's comments and congratulate Laura on her upcoming adventures and thank her for pairing with me during this process where we had to learn how to do this webinar stuff, and we held hands together and laughed together and cried together, and we made it through. So good luck, Laura.
We did it.
Yeah, good job, Laura. Good job, Laura. You've been a virtual support person. I mean, I don't think I've ever actually, I can remember way back when meeting you once, maybe twice in person, but the rest of it's been all
COVID.
virtual.
Yeah, Fire Station 1. Yep.
Yeah. God, that
Now,
seems like
as long as we're singing Laura's praises, I'll jump back in and say that coming into a new organization where you really don't know very many people is challenging, and it was pretty much seamless, and that seamlessness was due in no small measure to Laura and the help she provided. I could not have done it, and I will be very grateful to her for a long time about that.
Thanks, Chief.
Congratulations, Laura, and thank you for not only for supporting this commission, but for supporting the department and two chiefs during your tenure here. So thank you so much, and just wishing you all the happiness and success in your new adventure.
I feel super grateful for having this opportunity to work with two amazing chiefs. Very, very honored.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. Is there anyone else who wants to say anything out there on the city side? Okay. All right. I guess now we're ready for item number 12, if there's a motion.
I move to adjourn.
A second?
I will second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you.